Welcome back to She Blurbs Podcast. I'm your host, Brook Wright, and today's guest we have Melissa Lombardo. Hi, Melissa. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hi. Thank you so much for being a guest today.
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you very much for having me.
So can you tell my listeners a little bit about your story, about how you survived a sexual assault?
So let's see. So I was in my college years, and I was sexually assaulted. This was approximately 20 some years ago, and I think the first thing that comes to my mind of how I survived it, when it was happening, I wasn't there. I was, but I wasn't. Can you hear me and just not see me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Let me know if you can hear me.
Okay. Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect.
It's kind of
sorry. Thank you.
So
I was sexually. Sorry about that. I was sexually assaulted in my college years. I was in my 20s. I was going to school, and I was probably a sophomore, junior time. And one of the ways that I survived sexual assault during that time period was not being present in my body and my thoughts. I was sexually assaulted, and my body was physically there, but the rest of me wasn't. It was out of body. I mean, the way I used to refer to it as was the movie reel of my mind. I felt like I was not there. I was able to see myself from a different point, and did not feel anything. And one of the biggest survival mechanisms during the time period after that, for many, many years, was to block. It didn't happen. If it didn't happen, then I was okay. I put on a very nice face, and I kept doing the things I was doing as much as I could, in public, but then, it was crying myself to sleep at night. It was not being able to sleep, at all, at some point in time. It was not taking care of myself. A lot of the survival mechanisms that I used were really post-sexual assault, of how I got through those days, weeks, months after the assault. I didn't tell anybody. And if I didn't tell anybody, maybe it didn't really happen. I think that might have been something that was going through my mind, and post-sexual assault as well. That wasn't healthy for me. And I did at some point, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on, start using my voice. And I think it wasn't until I was able to really deal with the things that had happened to me in the past that I was able to find my voice, and perhaps that's why I'm able to be here speaking today.
Yes. So let me ask you a question. So me and you had like the same kind of experience with our sexual assault. Let me ask you. So does it ever replay in your head now that you're older and it happened years ago? Like, does it ever replay in your head? Because for me, it still replays in my head over and over. Like small things trigger it, and I'm like flashbacks of it. Mm-hmm. Does that ever happen to you?
It does. It's a lot less and fewer and far between. It's interesting that you asked that question, because I published my book, Hurt, Healing, and Hope: Thriving Beyond Sexual Assault, and I was
let me show people.
Getting
Can they see it?
Yes, there it is. So I published my book, Hurt, Healing, and Hope: Thriving Beyond Sexual Assault, based on my experiences of my healing process. And this is directly related to your question. It's a 3-act monologue. It's a performance piece in a book. There's a journal component. And I was getting really close to publishing. I published the paperback on May 20th, and I published the hardcover at the end of June. So about 2 or 3 weeks before the paperback published, a few weeks before I was going to give a talk and have an event for the book inauguration, I had a flashback. and it struck me like nothing has ever struck me before. I remembered something about that moment right after the sexual assault. I was standing in the shower. I was taking a shower. It was, just a regular shower. We all have to do that. And the way that I put my hands on my shoulders to let the water just run over me, it brought me right back to the moment soon after it happened, literally within the hour after it happened. And the person had departed, and I was left alone in the apartment that I was house sitting for at the time. And I didn't remember until May, a few weeks before my book inauguration, that after that person left, I took a shower because I felt dirty. I wanted to just be clean. And I put my hands in a certain way on my shoulders. And it wasn't until just recently that I remembered that. And I just started crying in the shower, not realizing that it was a memory somewhere locked away in my head from so long ago. Because I don't remember, and I was telling my husband, I don't remember any of those moments, or I didn't until just now. So it was just a experience for me to work through. And I think what was good about it is that my brain unlocked this memory that I didn't know I had of something I don't remember even doing. And the way I was able to work through that emotion really helped me reflect on just how far I've come since those moments, since that time period. And it's something that I'll never forget. And it's something that your body always is going to remember. I have other moments like that as well, and just not as strong. And I'm sure that there are things I don't remember about that might at some point trigger me that I don't even realize. And it's just being able to work through those and not be in that moment and stay in that moment, but being able to recognize what had happened, to be able to work through that moment, to continue to thrive, to continue to do the day to day and do the things that you want to do, or in my case, advocating, educating, and talking about my experience as a way to help others also heal and process.
Oh,
So I
yes,
really
definitely.
appreciate your question as well, and really appreciate that. And thank you everyone who's listening. That's not something I think I would normally even talk about, but I feel trust and confidence here with Brooke, and I know that things like that, and the things that we talk about those moments and the after moments, I think are really crucial because it happens to all of us in different ways, and I think it's important that we speak about it. I stayed silent for so long, and I'm not about staying silent anymore, because the more I can talk about it, the more I think it can help me, and the more I hope it helps others to not have to continue living in those moments in the past and the present.
Yeah, I really like the way you handled it because for me, I don't know, I still get angry about it. I don't know if other survivors get angry about it, but when I'm triggered, I get mad. Like, I get really filled and I'm just like, I want to fight somebody because I didn't like what happened, even though it was 11 years ago. And I don't know, I haven't been able to cry about it. I just get angry about it. Is that, I don't know if that's normal or not. Like, I just get upset.
Well, everybody goes through and experience any type of trauma in a different way. So I think that your reaction is your reaction. Your way of dealing with it or processing it or thinking about it is unique to you, because healing isn't linear. I've had my moments before where I was angry. Why did this happen? And this was a different moment. And one of the things that I think has been hard for me in the aftermath of sexual assault was having close, intimate relationships. I'm married now. I met my husband while I lived abroad in Nicaragua, and he has been a wonderful support for me. And I have had to really reflect on, why I might be acting the way I am, and I'd have my moments where I would be also angry, like, why can't I just be normal? Why, that's what was going on in my head at the time. And, why can't this go in a different way? How come I'm reacting this way? Where is it coming from? But I wasn't always that reflective.
Mhm.
In the beginning, I would have my mini rages of, beating myself up, and
You're freezing now. Okay, now I can hear you.
but then at the same time of being angry, then I would get upset, Oh, sorry. So I mean, I think everybody is going to process in a different way, and it doesn't matter, if it was, 1 year ago, 11 years ago, or 20 years ago, because everybody is different. The way that everybody processes their own trauma is different, and we might have flashbacks, we might have triggers, and sometimes movies cause me to have a trigger, or something on social media like a meme will cause me to have a trigger, just maybe a word or two that I hear, and then my brain is maybe somewhere else. Because it doesn't, for me, my triggers don't even have to do specifically with sexual assault. I can see something on television that refers to child abuse, and that might not directly be related to me, but that triggers me into the whole, let's see, what would it, the whole, I can't even think of the word right now, but it would trigger me to think about sexual violence in general, and what's happening. And I start thinking about the effect that, this will have on the child, and the effects that sexual assault has had on me. And, so my brain snowballs, into it, or I can't sleep at night because I might have seen a movie that had a little bit of suspense, that just insinuated maybe something that triggers me. I sometimes don't know. I mean, before I wouldn't even watch television or movies in the past because I didn't want to be triggered. Now I and I'll tell people I've changed that. I was actually just recently, we were just at a friend's house, and there was a video. We were watching music videos, and there was a scene in a music video that had nothing. It was not sexual assault. It was not rape. It was not child abuse. There was something in it that triggered me. I don't know how to explain it. I said to him, I said, I can't watch this. He goes, no, it's just a video. I go, I can't. I know what it's going to do to my head. I know where I'm going to go after this. It, triggered from, something. It could have been a little piece of skin, a skirt that was a bit too short, and a guy looking at the person, the woman in a way that was maybe partially sexual, and that could trigger me at moments where, then I'm going to start thinking of, what does that mean in the bigger spiel? What are the images that are going out into society that we're seeing? What are we teaching these young boys and these young girls, as they're growing up? What is it that they're consuming social media wise, that becomes ingrained? So it's this, culture of sexual violence that's ingrained. So those things also might affect me, because I know what happened to me, and I know that somebody did this to me, and what is this movie or what have you, doing to maybe make that child watching it do something to someone else, or
Exactly.
And so those are things. I went through an advocacy training course. I'm a Connecticut sexual assault crisis advocate. And after I was sexually assaulted, I was silent about it for a long time. I went to a friend's house, and I ended up sharing with a friend what had happened, not using the word sexual assault, not using the word rape. And he said to me after that, he said, Melissa, what you're telling me is that you've been raped. And I cried and cried a lot. He brought me actually to the sexual assault crisis services of our area, and I ended up receiving at the time. And I think if it wasn't for her, I might not have been able to start writing. I might not have published this book. She encouraged me to write my feelings. And at the time, I couldn't speak them out loud, but I was able to write about the hurt that I felt, the healing that took place afterwards. And many years later, I decided to become a sexual assault crisis advocate. But it didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen in the first or second course that I tried to apply for. Just the idea that I want to apply for this brought up a lot for me. Just the idea that I inquired about it brought up a
Mm-hmm.
lot in my head. So it took me 3 tries to actually apply, get
Yeah.
accepted, and then actually go to the class. And I was able to go to the class. I did have a few moments where it was a lot because I
Mm-hmm.
realized at that time that I have a history of sexual violence. There's a
Oh,
history
wow.
of what I bring to the table, but at the
Mhm.
same time, it was important enough for me to continue on because it was healing to me, and at the same time, I'd like to be able to support others, going through their own processing post trauma. So I became a sexual assault crisis advocate in the same organization that attended me, when I was in college, and who also certified me to become a crisis advocate, wrote the
Mhm.
foreword of the book, and a portion of the proceeds of this book go to the same organization. So I really liked the
Mhm.
fact that they were open to not only writing the foreword, but receiving donations. So anyone who purchases a book, there's a donation going to the same crisis center here in Connecticut as well. So it was a
Oh,
very,
wow.
it was a circular, very circular. They came to my book inauguration. They've been great. I've so far, just since May 20th, I've been able to donate over $100 to the same organization. And prior to coming on to the podcast today, I actually set up on Instagram a fundraiser for the same organization.
Oh, wow.
So I have 30 days to raise $100 more for an organization who's helping other survivors. So
Oh, I
I
love
really
what you're
want to
doing.
support them. And they gave me a scholarship, or I received a scholarship to become certified with them. And I'm now
Mhm.
into the middle of year 2 as a crisis advocate as well.
Nice. I love what you're doing. I love that you're helping sexually. So, does it help young kids too, like teenagers and younger people, like
Um,
the younger
yeah,
crowd?
yeah, I think, well, the crisis center here in Connecticut, it helps any age group. They have different support groups. I think also
Mhm.
the book that I wrote, I think it is geared towards. I originally wrote it. The book is actually my journal entries from when I was going through that time, and I wrote them all down, and I put the journals somewhere where I couldn't see them. And years later, I went to study at the School of International Training in Brattleboro, Vermont. I ended up having a work study at the Cultural Diversity Office, and I had the opportunity to plan activities for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And so,
Oh,
along with a
wow.
group of colleagues and students at the school, we presented a whole month of activities. The end of that month, I wrote the initial draft of what today is the book Hurt, Healing, and Hope. And at the time, it
Mm.
included stories that other students and faculty had written. I've since removed those and replaced them with new parts, but it was a really powerful experience. I called the same friend that I had first, told my story to, and I asked him if he can go to my mother's house and he could get all the journals and bring them to me to Vermont. And he brought this whole box, and I started going through them, and it was very therapeutic. It was very difficult putting everything in order and writing it out. And at the time, I couldn't read any of them out loud. I was in the audience. A friend of mine, her name is Reed. She helped direct the first draft, the rough draft of the work. And
Mhm.
other students and faculty colleague read the different parts that I wrote. So I wrote it, and I was
Mhm.
there at the event, but I couldn't read anything at the time. 20 years later, as I had mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, my sister and I are recording an audiobook. Oh, actually, maybe I didn't say that live. Her and I are recording an audio book. 20 years later, I've been able to read many parts of that book, a lot of them my own story. So that for me has been also another full circle, something I couldn't do before, I can do now. And I'm reading my own book out loud. So the first time I've actually read any of my book out loud was last
Mhm.
Saturday when my sister was here at the
Oh,
house and we were recording. Aside from that, I've only been able to read it to myself as I've been correcting it, in
mhm.
hoping that my brother and 2 other friends who had edited it were able to pick up on things that didn't make sense, because it was still hard for me until I published to actually read it out loud, because it would bring me back to those moments so quickly.
Oh, wow. So, what inspired you to write it like a script?
I was really interested when I was in college. I was reading a book. It was called Rockabye, and I can't remember the author's name right now. Samuel, I can't remember, but I liked his style, and he wrote kind of they weren't monologues that you would read out loud, but they were poems, and I liked the style, and I started writing in a similar way, because I thought it's not a similar way, but I started writing from the first person. I don't know if that makes sense. People needed to hear more of a first person story. When I wrote the draft and when I wrote published work, I separated the voices out, because so many people have unfortunately had an experience like ours. And I just think it's so important that it's not just my voice, it's many voices talking about that topic, and also using those voices to advocate for others who might not be able to speak about. So I think what was important for me to write the book as a form of a play or a spoken word is because it's something that we need to talk about. When I first started to think about the path to publishing, my thought was that if I can make a difference in one person's life, then I would have done my job as a human being to help. And then as I continued forward with that journey, I said, I want to let as many people know about this book as possible, because the more people that know about it, you never know where somebody's healing can start. So, how can I do that? By making it into a spoken word piece that's somebody can actually perform, that you can go to a community theater and you can watch it. You can listen to an audiobook and you can feel what a survivor might be feeling. It's not a cut and dry process. It's messy. You go forward, you go back, you stand still, you fall down, you stand up. Someone hopefully is there for you along the way that's going to support you, your support system. And it's all over the place. And I wanted to have something in a format that people could kind of, say, okay, she went through hurt. You have an experience like this, you go through hurt. And then at some point I found that I started to go through healing. And then by the end of this book, there's hope. And 20 years later, I thought that hope that I saw something back then, that there's something out there. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what thriving was until 20 years later. I didn't really know what was going on within me, because I blocked really well. And then as I started to think about the publishing journey, I wanted to help others. I wanted to deal once and for all. I don't know if that's really possible, but once and for all, I wanted to really deal with this. I wanted to make rape and sexual assault something that you could talk about at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I said this to my mother, who I think she's listening now, so I'm hoping. I said this to I said this to her once, that we've achieved this goal. She's been one of my biggest supporters, and we talk about this everywhere now. My mother and I were out to dinner with a friend, and we're at a busy pizza place, and my mother's friend says, "Oh, hey, Melissa, I hear you're writing a book. She wants to know about it." And I'm thinking, what the topic is?
Right.
But we're talking about rape at the dinner table. And my mother was in a store, and somebody came up to her and say, "Hey, I heard Melissa's writing a book." So she's in the grocery store and somebody's asking her about sexual assault. I'm at breakfast with friends recently, and we're at this diner, in the town that I live in, and we're talking about sexual assault. It just amazes me that people actually do want to talk about it. It's just overwhelming. So I also really have to learn how to take breaks, how to retreat afterwards, how to create boundaries that, I normally wouldn't have, but this is a topic that is so important and people are interested in it. But at the same time, it takes a lot out of me as well. So I think, just that, to answer your question, and I think it's maybe I kind of was circular in my speaking, but I mean, the inspiration is the survivor like me. I know what I've been through, and I want to try to help others so they don't have to go through those same things, and it's, the inspiration is that it's a topic that people are normally hush hush about, or at least when I was going through it, all, and how maybe it's my age, but years ago we didn't talk about these things. I didn't talk about these things, and it's being able to make that part of my everyday conversation. It's taking control of something that I didn't have control over. I didn't have control over that narrative 20 years ago, but I do now. And so that for me has also been, I don't know if it would be the inspiring part, but the healing aspect. So publishing a book about this, publishing a book about my experiences, and wanting to help people and give to the organization that has helped me, in a sense, has also been that journey through healing. Publishing became synonymous with healing. I didn't have control over what happened to me now, but this publication I do. I have a very good friend of mine, colleague, and his name is Nikita Prokhorov, and we went to college together. He knew me during that time. He's a great graphic designer. He designed my logo. He did the layout. My husband is from Nicaragua. I met him in Nicaragua. And he's an artist and an illustrator, and he created the illustrations. So I decided to form my own imprint called Write, Heal, Thrive to be able to publish my book. And through that, I have been able to control every aspect of that to take back my narrative of what was taken away from me. So it's also very symbolic. My son helped translations for the upcoming Spanish version. And my brother was the editor, along with a friend named Lee and another friend of the family, Maureen. So I've had a lot of family and friends support as well with looking at the publication. Does it have a period here? Is that grammar correct? Reading over versions of it. My sister is an actress in Oregon right now, and she has brought life to the monologues, doing shorter skits of it. So it's been a family production in a sense, and a friend production.
Wow.
So for me, it's been synonymous with healing. Publishing has been so healing for me. And in addition to that, my health has, like, one of the after effects 20 years later of topics. No, I'm not in my, one of the after effects, or one of the consequences, the good consequence of actually facing these trauma and healing is that my illnesses, I've had many unexplained illnesses over all the years. I used to get 16 migraines a month. I came back from having lived abroad for 17 years into the United States. I came back with many illnesses. I had 8 different illnesses in my migraines. Since publishing, my migraines have went down to 4, 5 at the most for the month versus the 16. And I came back to the United States with a first stage cancer. I've been fine for the last 3 years. And it's just, as soon as I published, it felt like a whole weight was off my shoulders. I'm not saying that everyone needs to publish. I'm just saying that what I've noticed of telling my story of going through this process, that my health has changed. I can I feel different. I'm not sure how to explain it. I haven't reflected on that quite yet, but I definitely can feel a difference in my health and just how I feel and how I speak about it. I can speak about my experience in a much different way now than before. If that makes any sense. There's readers out there's listeners out there that can relate to any of this, but I'm very interested in hearing people's thoughts as well at some point.
Yeah, I really love it. So when you mentioned that your husband, he illustrated your book, like he drew the pictures in it, I wanted to talk about that because I was looking, he's really good. Like, I don't know if people can see it. Can you see it? A little.
I can see. Yeah, I can see it. Yeah. So he act 1 is hurt, act 2 is healing, act 3 is hope. And he has been able to create illustrations that if you did not read anything and you only knew the name of the act, hurt, healing, or hope, and saw his illustrations, you would understand so much about the about what the content was in the act. He
Oh,
really encapsulated everything that I couldn't say, and everything that I could say. It's in those illustrations. I was really impressed. Those are actually original watercolor illustrations. So
oh,
he went
wow.
through so many different drafts, and those are the final drafts, but each draft was done by hand. It was a long
Wow.
process as well for him. Yep, everything was by hand. And then what we did is we did a high quality scan of the final illustrations, and that's what you're seeing in the book.
Oh,
So we
wow.
actually do have every single illustration we have here. And the front of the
Wow.
book has an illustration. There's a couple others towards the end. And I am
Wow.
also, I just wrote a guided journal. I just finished writing it last week, and it's right now in
Oh,
layout. And that has additional illustrations also created by Eduardo Arias Cruz as well.
those are amazing. I can't wait to get the other one. I'm definitely am. So, can you tell us what inspired this part of the book? I don't know if you'll be able to see it,
I
right? But
can't. So tell me. I have my book in front of me. So tell me the page.
the page 57, the pre-reading discussion. This is amazing. When I first saw it, I was like, "Oh, there's pages where you can answer questions."
Yes. So I really wanted this to be interactive. I wanted somebody to be able to read this to themselves. I wanted them to be able to read it out loud. I wanted them to be able to perform it or attend a performance. And I wanted I visualized the post-reading discussion questions 2 or 3 ways. One way is that you can read the book, then you can answer the questions on your own, and there's space in the back to answer them. You can also, I don't have a book club meeting, and you can read the book, and then along with the other members of the book club, you can answer some of these questions for further reflection to become a bit more in depth. And then also you can use similar questions as part of a talk at an end of a community presentation. So I'd like to really have licensed people take a license and write, and then they can perform, and then they can have a discussion afterwards, or hire me, for example, to help them with their performance, and then have an author talk going over some of these same questions. At the end of the book as well, there is space for a reader to journal their own hurt, healing, and hope. I thought it might be interesting that, if some people identify with certain pieces, but then other people might have their own piece that upon reading and reflecting on what they just read, they might be inspired to write as well. So if they write a piece about hurt just for their eyes, they can kind of see, where would this fit in Melissa's book? Where might my piece fall? And then maybe they find their own way through hurt into healing and into hope by also journaling, because a big part of this book is I was able to start healing through journaling and through writing. And that I was able to work through some of these really hard topics and make sense of what was going on. And I'm hoping that somebody else who might be inclined to write can do the same thing. And when we write, it's just for us. We don't have to show it to anyone. I just happen to show it to everybody because it's here. A lot, these journals weren't meant at the time to be something that other people would see, but it helped me get through what was happening at the time. So there is space to write answers to the journal, to the post-reading discussion. There's also space later on as a journal to write your own hurt, healing, and hope. And then if somebody does perform the book, so say there's a cast, because in the book it's written for a cast of 4 plus external readers, there is a performance note section. So somebody might be one of those characters, and as they're reading through it, they might want to take notes about how they can really bring out that emotion to the audience that they might be reading to help the audience understand how a survivor might feel. The book, even though the book is titled Hurt, Healing, and Hope, Thriving Beyond Sexual Assault, there are instances in the book of childhood sexual abuse domestic violence as well, and LGBTQ community as well. There are references, there are statistics as well about people of color, about men and women who have faced sexual abuse as well. So it's not just about sexual assault. It does bring in other topics as well. And so I think it's something that a lot of people might be able to relate to. And it's not just something for survivor. The same experience that I had at the pizza restaurant with my mother's friend. And one of the things that came out of that conversation, and this woman, wanted to know more about my book. She's older. She's probably in her 60s. And, there, like I had mentioned before, we were at dinner at, busy pizza restaurant. And she says, another thing she says to me after wanting to know more about this book, she says, Melissa, can this book help me? Is this book something that I can read too? And it stopped me for a minute. And I said to her, she's a supporter, she's an ally. And I said, yes, it can, because it's going to help her. It's going to help anyone listening who is supporting someone, what the survivor they're supporting might be feeling, how they might be able to better support their survivor. Just knowing, the emotions, I think sometimes that we go through, it might help a healing ally. I call them healing allies, and, help them be able to be there in a more positive way, even though I know they're being very positive anyway, but it just might help them with other things as well. And I think, also, I'm a survivor and I'm also an ally, and, and I'm also a supporter. I think there's a lot of mix of those roles as well.
I want to thank you so much, Melissa, for coming on my podcast today and chat with me. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. I think what's really important for me is that there are people like you out there, Brooke, that make yourselves vulnerable and bring people on the podcast to talk about topics such as this one, because it's not, it's something that we need to talk about. And I really, really give you a lot of credit, and I really admire that strength in you to be able to bring this out into the world.
Thank you. It's part of my healing. So yeah, it's helped me a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you all so much for listening to my interview with Melissa Lombardo. And if you would like to purchase her book, I think you can see it. I have linked her website on this, so you can go and find her book and purchase it. Thank you all so much for listening. I hope you have a great day. Bye.